just going to go through this, and I'll leave a lot of time for questions if anyone has questions. Okay, so quick intro on me. This is me with my committee right outside where you guys go every day. This is the day of my defense. So I was born in Mexico City. I studied economics undergrad at ITAM in Mexico City. And then I came to APEC, and then I graduated in 2021. You can see from this picture that I graduated post-pandemic because we are all standing like kind of a little bit apart, COVID times. Okay, then I started a postdoc in Boccone's Gender Lab, and then I moved to tech. So I started in 2021 at Meta as a visiting researcher, which is kind of like a postdoc as well, or like a temporary position in a research team. And then this year I started at Google. So I started in March. I've been here for 9 months as an economist. How did I end up in tech is kind of complicated. It has to do with life choices and personal life, etc. We can get into it if you guys are interested, but I will spare you for now. So I have just a couple of slides. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you all about is what economists in tech do. I don't know how much you are exposed to people working in tech, but this is kind of like my quick summary. So there are 3 broad categories of economist job types in tech. And again, this is from my experience. There might be many different other jobs out there because the industry is big, but this is what I found. It's like kind of like a good summary. So first of all, there's like explicit economist roles. One of the biggest companies that hires like most economists, as you might know, is Amazon, and they have like huge economist teams. And there's also a small number of other companies that have explicit economist roles. So for example, there are some economist roles at Google, but most companies don't have like an economist ladder. That's just kind of like a selection. Then there is data scientists. For example, at Google, there are many jobs that are economist jobs that are like called data scientists, including my job is actually, it's an economist/data scientist job. Many companies, I would say most companies fall here in the data scientist kind of bucket. And then some companies, for example, Meta, have research scientists or applied scientists like Uber. Uber, it's applied science. They're called them applied scientists. Scientist means like you have a PhD, essentially. Or other companies have machine learning engineers. For example, Instacart has a machine learning engineer role or team for economists. If you're looking for jobs in tech, all of these titles, except obviously the one that is economist, but like data scientist, research scientist, applied scientist, machine learning engineer, these are all titles that can apply to non-economists as well. So you have to look for context in the job posting. So for example, there might be research scientists working on like optic stuff for like virtual reality, and they would still be called research scientists, or applied scientists working on like, I don't know, biology. I don't know. There's like very different types of people or like backgrounds or roles for these job titles. Now, what do economists do in tech? Like, what topics do we think about? There's like a wide variety of roles, even within companies. You can imagine that like some bigger companies have like different teams of economists working on different things. So topics can range from more like business questions, like pricing questions, auctions, stuff like that, to more causal inference, like more like statistics. That's kind of more my role, is more statistics, causal inference, etc. And there's like a lot of different, so wide variety. And then in terms of the way that teams operate, some teams are consulting teams, like my team is a consulting team, which means we kind of like work with teams that are actually embedded in product, but we don't own products. So there are other teams that are embedded in product. For example, Amazon has both types of economists. There might be an economist for Alexa. And so that economist works embedded in product. The product is Alexa, and they work there and they answer questions only about Alexa. But Amazon also has like a central economics team, and those people kind of like dabble into different, depending on what's hot at the moment and like what people need help with. And then there's other teams that are more research oriented, like my team at Meta, the one that I first joined. That was a research team. So we were not embedded in product, and we also were not consulting other teams. We were kind of like focused on our own research. And then there's other smaller groups of jobs like policy roles. Like some companies have economists helping them like think about like what's happening in the world, what's going to become relevant, like how we can respond to policy changes, legislation, etc. If people have questions, you can just like interrupt me. Then what skills do economists in tech need? I guess if you guys are thinking about a job in tech, how should you invest in your skills and what kinds of things should you put in your CV? First, there's like all the technical stuff. So you definitely need to code. The difficulty or the intensity of the need to code may vary across jobs. Like there are some jobs that are very code heavy and that they expect you to be very good at coding, just like an engineer essentially. And there are some jobs, for example, policy jobs are usually more light on coding. I didn't write here, but most people use Python. Some people also use R. And you definitely need SQL. I didn't write it here, but I'll edit these slides and upload them. But yeah, SQL is also something that you kind of need to know. The good news is that it's pretty easy. Okay. Oh, and some jobs. Okay, so all jobs will require some sort of programming. All jobs will require statistics. This is like essentially unavoidable if you're an economist in the industry in general, but especially in tech. And this is an important one. And many jobs, increasingly so, require you to know some machine learning. Obviously, if you're a machine learning engineer, you'll need to know a lot about machine learning, but you will come across many machine learning algorithms and problems in the industry. That's just the way. Obviously, it's like a good tool for when you have a lot of data, et cetera, and prediction problems, which matter in the industry. So that's increasingly more important. Even if you are not a machine learning person, you need to know about it. And people will like to see that in your CV if you've done some of that. And some jobs will require structural modeling. For example, my current role does not require that much structural modeling because I'm more focused on the statistics and causal inference. But there are other teams at Google that like do a lot more structural modeling. And the same holds for all other big companies. And in smaller companies, you might be required to do all of these things. Like it depends. Regarding non-technical skills, you will see everywhere that you need to do cross-functional collaboration. And this just means being able to communicate and work with people in different teams and roles with diverse backgrounds. So you're not going to be working only with economists, and you're not going to be working only with PhDs, and you need to be able to work with people that have different backgrounds like that. There's also stakeholder communication and management, and that means being able to explain your work to people who use it to make decisions. So my stakeholders, for example, can be the director of some org or like the VP of something that are going to take my analysis and like use it to make actual decisions about like in the company. So I need to be able to understand what they want from me, explain to them what I can do, and then explain to them what I did, how to use it. And those things are very important. It's not and they're very different from what you would need to do in academia. Like it's not a paper that like the experts are going to read, or like you need to convince all the reviewers. This is like you need to explain to the VP how to interpret the stuff that you did. You want them to use it. It should be useful, but it should not be, misused. So that's an important one. And then something else is that you'll need to keep learning on the job. Like in all of these jobs, they don't expect you to know everything, but you will need to like find new things depending on the problems that you're working with. So for example, you will learn to write and speak about your work, like I was saying, or how to use different technical tools, a new algorithm. Like, I don't know, maybe you didn't use neural networks before. Now someone asked you to do it that way, and you're like, okay, I need to know why. Stuff like that. Okay. I think this is my last section. How is a job in tech different from a job in academia? These are just some differences, but obviously there's many more. So the first one, maybe the most important for someone like you guys that is like trying to figure out what to do. I mean, I'm guessing that's kind of the point of this seminar, like to be exposed in different things. The first thing is that the types of questions you get to answer is going to be very different. So in most jobs, most teams, you will need to work on something that's relevant for the business or relevant for your organization. So that means that you can't choose what to work on fully, right? In some jobs, there's more flexibility. Like my current role, I have a lot of flexibility within the scope of my team, right? So I can't just like ask questions that are interesting. I mean, I can ask, but like it's not going to count for my promotion. So that's kind of a little bit important. Then the data you get to use and how, like, people think like, oh, when you work in tech, you have like all the data you could possibly need, and like this is amazing. And in part, yes, but there are also many constraints. Like there are some things that you can't do with the data because either regulation or because a variety of different issues. So it's true that you will have a lot of data, but it's never, it's not, there's no free lunch. So there are some things that will constrain you. Then what else? The cadence of work and project life cycle. I think this is an important one. In most jobs, you'll have shorter timeframes per project. And I say most jobs because there are some research teams that really go deep and like more like an academic cadence. But in most jobs, you'll have shorter timeframes per project, and you will need to be more scrappy, more hacky, do more imperfect work. And this can be really hard coming from PhD, where you're used to kind of focusing on getting every detail correct. And like that is not something that you can afford to do in most teams and most projects. However, so essentially I'm saying there are trade-offs that you'll have to make, and that can be difficult, but it can also be nice because you don't have to like work on something until you hate it, like your job market paper, that you can't see it anymore. Like that probably won't happen. So anyway, you have to get things done, get things faster and in a useful way, even with some trade-offs you might make along the way. That was a big adjustment for me, I have to say. And then something else about project lifecycle, you're more likely to work in teams. Like in tech, you will very, very rarely work by yourself. And that can be really nice. Yeah. Okay. Then career paths. Okay, so jobs in tech have ladders with levels. I don't know if you guys know this. Maybe this is like not news to you, but what that means is that you need to get promoted every time to increase in level. So you might enter at level 4, then there's 5, blah, 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 blah. So that there's like promotion cycles. It's not like, oh, you did a good job and then your manager randomly is like, you know what, I'm going to promote you like in the movies. No, there are like specific cycles at which people decide to go up for promotion, and then there's a committee that can vary across companies. But essentially, you need to push for your promotion, and depending on the team, this might be hard. Like there are some teams that have really high bars for promotion, and also the higher you are in levels, the harder it will be to get promoted to a different level. So that is different. Now, you don't have to get promoted. If you are like in level 5 and you like that level, you can stay. But this is kind of like a different compared to, for example, tenure track jobs that like there's kind of like one promotion, right? I mean, there are subsequent promotions, but it's kind of more like you either get tenure or you don't. And then here's like a constant, like it's like smaller steps, but longer ladder. What else? Okay. One thing that you might not know is that at most companies, there are different job ladders for people managers and individual contributors. And what ladders mean is just like that thing I was talking about, the level. So there's, for example, individual contributors would be kind of like me. You're doing the work, you're doing analyses, you're driving these projects. And people managers, you have a team, and it's not like you're their boss, you're their manager, which means you try to allocate their time and effort to things that matter to the org. But in most of these roles, you have some flexibility. Like your manager is not going to tell you, like, now you do this, and I'm going to claim credit for it. No, it's like you are the individual contributor, and the people manager manages several different people so that their agendas and time are spent in a way that makes sense for the org and the company. So you could choose if you want to be a people manager. Most economists and people with PhDs start at least as individual contributors, and they may transition later to a manager role. But yeah, which I guess is a possibility if that's something that you like. Okay, work-life balance can vary a lot in companies and teams, but in general, tech jobs pay well and they allow you to have a life outside of work. You can ask about this when you're interviewing for a specific team. Now, it's important to note that this is not true for all industry jobs. For example, consulting and finance are known for having much worse work-life balance, and they may pay more than tech, especially some roles. But those are not like, yeah, people work a lot longer hours in those jobs. Then maternity and paternity leave benefits are good in tech. This is important to me. It was important before, and it's still important. And in general, even if you're not interested in having kids or you're not thinking about that, outside life is valued. So there are like better boundaries in tech than in most other industries, including academia, between work and life, other outside life. Okay, also different stability and mobility. People working in industry switch jobs a lot more than people in academia. So I already switched jobs, and I graduated like 3 years ago, and I already switched once. This can be good because you have more flexibility to go somewhere where you will learn something different or where you will like it more, etc. But it's just different. Like some people like the idea of like, I find a job and then I stay there for the rest of my life. That's not standard in industry. Nothing wrong with that. Just like it's different. Something else that's important, you may have more geographical flexibility because there's remote work, there's hybrid work. Like tech is more, in general, there are more cities that have these jobs than academia, I guess. But there are some risks to remote work, and we can talk about that. But maybe you guys already know that like some companies are like ramping down on remote work, etc. Okay, other miscellaneous differences. Something that was important to me and that kind of determined, or like at least was very important in me ending up in tech, is that generally these jobs are based off of places where there are more jobs. And this is good if you have a partner that is either on the market or not. It's kind of easier for partners to find jobs that they like in cities where there's tech jobs than like sometimes like liberal arts colleges are like somewhere in the middle of New England, and your partner is going to be like, what am I going to do there? I don't know. Perks are fun. Like these jobs have a lot of perks. Like you guys have probably heard about like the food and whatever. That's nice. That's a cute thing to have. And then depending on your interest, some jobs are pretty cool. I mean, if you're interested in technology, obviously this is really, it's a really cool space to work on. And also you'll interact with people from more diverse backgrounds. You'll meet engineers, computer scientists, statisticians, business people. Like there's all kinds of people. Like one of my friends here at Google is a designer, and she works on like hardware design. I don't know. It's like, it's pretty broad, and that's really cool. Oh, I forgot I had this section here. Okay, what do I do on my day-to-day in my current role? I have a lot of meetings. First, I have meetings discussing my projects. Maybe I have to explain to a stakeholder what I think needs to be done and why, and kind of explain my point of view. Then I might also have meetings to ask questions to teams about like what data they need to figure out if I can help them. Maybe they have an inference problem and I need to first know if that's something that I can work on. Then I can talk about what I already did to some other stakeholder and like when I will do it, etc. Then I also do deep work. So I code, I might like take a look at some data. I might like explore alternatives. I might do some analyses. Then I spend time writing my results in ways that people can use. And that's really important. That's like a really, really important thing in my role, because your analysis can be amazing, but if the VP doesn't understand what you did, they're going to use it incorrectly. And that's a problem, right? So that's really important. And yeah, also thinking about the business context. That's also a difference. Like in academia, you can define your question, and there's a lot more like flexibility in that. here, like the business context will tell you like, no, that's actually not relevant for this, or like, how is that going to be applied, or how is that going to be useful, or what about this other thing that's also taking place. So you can't ignore the fact that you are working at a company, I guess. Then I have more meetings. I have a lot of meetings about brainstorming approaches, discussing data issues, debugging code. Like maybe I need to talk to some engineers to see if like we're on the same page about something that we're building. I don't know, stuff like that. I do some project management, meaning like, oh, am I like on schedule to the stuff that I needed to deliver? Like, am I waiting for something from other people? So I do kind of like that project management. In this role, it might depend, like this is again for my current role. My day-to-day was very different when I was at Meta. I had fewer meetings because I was in a research team. So I was more focused on my thing and I had fewer stakeholders to interface with. There's trade-offs to that also, but okay. And yeah, the share of time you spend on each of these is very role dependent. So you should ask about this during interviews if you care about this. Okay, other resources other than just hearing me talk about my personal experience. There are some podcasts here and I can share these slides so you can click on the links. You should listen to what Susan Athey has to say, John List, Mika Rukanen, and this guy also, Vincent Martin for Meta, talking about how companies need economist engineers. What are engineers? Engineers are people that build stuff. In this case, it's like coding, right? They build tools, they code stuff. So you can build an algorithm or you can build like an experimentation platform or I don't know, stuff like that. Also, I forgot to say one difference is that we do a lot more experiments in tech than in academia. That's just like part of the toolkit. Not everything we do in experiments, but there's a lot more. So that's cool. Then there's also a couple of articles here, why tech companies hire so many economists and why economists want to work in Silicon Valley. You can also always email me. And one quick note is that tech jobs don't necessarily hire on the same calendar as the academic job market. So if you're on the job market and you're interviewing for a tech job in November, they're not assuming that you're going to start in July. Like they're probably looking to hire someone around then. So just keep that in mind in case like you are trying to go on the market, or if you're trying to avoid the market, you can. If you just want to go to tech, you might be able to interview before. So there are some tech jobs that hire on the same calendar, like that go to the meetings, etc. But many, if not most jobs don't hire on the same calendar as the academic job market. Okay, I'm going to stop for questions, and then I have some job market advice that nobody asked me about. Nobody asked me for, but I have a slide on it, but I'm going to stop here and we can talk. Okay. Okay, so last slide. When I was on the market, I forgot to ask myself many times, do I want this job or do I just want to have a job? And like, it's okay to just want to have a job, but don't sell yourself short just because you like, don't just take it any job. Like, just give yourself time and like know why you're taking this job. Yeah, just keep in mind that the market is about finding your match. It's not just like finding a job. I mean, of course, it's about finding a job, but it should also be a good match for you. Something else that I tell people as often as I can is that it's okay to prioritize other aspects of your life. I was in a two-body problem when I went on the market. And that was a big part of why we ended up in industry, because it was just too hard to kind of match two academic placements. That's not the only reason, but it would have been really hard. And I really wanted to live in the same house as my husband. So I think that's okay. And I think it's totally fair to prioritize that kind of thing. Or your specific interest. Maybe you're like, oh, tech sounds nice, but I don't care about business at all. You're like, yeah, find something that you actually like. That's fair. Then ask questions about the specific team role company. Like, not all jobs in industry are the same. There are some jobs that have more deep work, which maybe you will enjoy, or less because maybe you don't like it. Just like ask questions and don't assume that like they're all the same. This can be a little hard if you're, for example, interviewing for Amazon, because they kind of like interview in general and then they match you, but you can still ask and just keep in mind that there is a variety of things out there. For example, what share of work is expected to be independently driven? That's important. Like there are some roles in which you just get a project and you work on that. And there are some jobs that you're like, oh no, you have to go and find your projects, and you might have preferences over those things. Then you should also ask, what does success in that role look like? Like, what are the expectations? And you should question, or you should think about whether that's something that you would enjoy doing. Like, for example, success looks like bringing in 45 projects. You're like, oh, do I want to have to go chase projects? Maybe that's not my personality. I don't know. Stuff like that. And then something else is that you should think about a career, not just a specific job. So you might be like, okay, this job is not like amazing, but it provides a skill that I think I can use in the future. So there might be strategic value to that job, and that's okay. You're not choosing your forever job. Like you're choosing a job. I mean, it's a little different in academia, right? But in general, like you're not like you went on the market once and then you're going to stay there forever. Like there's a strategy. Like you're playing a longer game, especially if you go into industry. Blah blah blah. Yeah, so think about what that specific job gives you, and like whether you want to prioritize that in that moment. And it's okay if the answer is money, like that's fine, but just like know that you can, some different things might matter to you. Okay, so something else that's related to what Divya said is that once you're in a specific industry, it's easier to switch within. So for example, I did that first job at Meta, and then it was easier, like because you are no longer like a fresh grad, and even if you're still in a junior position, people see that you have some experience, and then it's much easier to switch within industries. So maybe if you really want to go into tech and you get an offer from Amazon, or you're like, oh, I don't know, Amazon sounds like there's really bad work-life balance. Maybe that's true, but maybe you stay there a year or two and then you switch to something you like more, like Google. And then related to that, this is kind of like regardless of which industry you go into, but like you should build, like that is important. And I think in academia, sometimes it's not emphasized, even though it also matters in academia, but it is important to know people, and like you will hear from other people about jobs and like about stuff. So it's important to invest in your network. And last but not least, if you're not an American citizen, you should ask about visa and green card sponsorships. And it should say here strategically, because you don't want to necessarily say this in the first conversation you have with a recruiter, but this is something important that you may want to keep in mind when you're choosing a job, because there are some jobs that will sponsor your visa but not your green card, and there are some other jobs that will sponsor your green card, and that can be something strategic that you care about. Like you might be like, oh, I prefer this job, but this other one sponsors my green card, and like there's value in that. So if that matters to you, you should ask about it strategically. Don't just like right away ask, but anyway.